Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions with my co-host Stacie here to talk about Extended Family Season 1, Episode 2, titled The Consequences of Making Yourself at Home. The episode's description reads as follows. When Trey spends his first night at the nest, he discovers evidence that Jim and Julia once had a more adventurous relationship than he imagined, and he must erase it. The episode was written by Jim Bally and directed by Ali Leroy, both of whom have had extensive experience in comedies. Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a spoiler-free podcast. If you haven't watched the episode, I recommend you go and check it out, and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you're on one of the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please subscribe. You'd also head over to my YouTube channel, Corn Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to our channel. Okay, Stacie, the first episode of the series that we covered, let's just say that it had a less than positive reaction from a lot of people.
Yeah, this is a weird one, right? So, as we're recording this, obviously we're recording early, so we haven't seen a response to episode 2 yet. This will launch right after the episode airs. So as we're speaking, nobody's seen episode 2 except for those of us with screeners. So yeah, our response to the reaction of the first episode. It aired twice.
Yes.
It aired first on December 23rd, right before Christmas, and then it had a re-airing in the regular time slot, which is Tuesday at 8:30, and that aired on, what was it, the 26th. And I'm a little unsure of where we're going to fall tonight when episode 2 airs.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see if there's any more positive reaction.
So, I watched the pilot when it originally launched on the 23rd. I rewatched it. That was, I don't know, my 4th time watching the episode because we'd already covered it.
Right.
I watched it with my husband, and he didn't have a lot of positive things to say as we were watching the episode. And I was a little confused by that.
Yeah.
Because it's not the typical reaction I'd expect from my husband when watching a comedy. And then I was live tweeting, I'll still call it tweeting, during the show, and there were a lot of really hateful comments on Twitter, X.
Now, part of that is just, you expect to sort of see that sort of thing online, especially on Twitter these days.
Every show has a lot of haters.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the way NBC decided to roll this thing out.
Yeah.
Which, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Okay, well, so first of all, airing a pilot the day before Christmas Eve was a little bit of a weird decision. And then, of course, they did re-air it, like I said, on its regular time slot. But then they also didn't advertise that.
Right.
They were advertising this one, airing episode 2. So this January 2nd is the official release date of the series. But it's going to be episode 2. And I have a little mixed feelings about that in and of itself. Like, why didn't we replay the pilot in its official spot on official release day? But anyways, regardless of that, so what happened on the 23rd is there was a football game on, and it finished.
Yep.
And then the show was airing. But then there was another football game that was starting.
Right.
And that was airing exclusively on Peacock. But for the first 5 minutes of the segment, so from it was at 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
So from 8 to 8:05, we had the lead in to the next football game, where they repeatedly said it is airing exclusively on Peacock.
Right.
Okay, and then Extended Family was starting at 8:05. I think some people in the audience got confused by this.
Okay, so let me just say that I've worked with the general public for 25 years. I've worked in customer service my entire life, and if there's anything I've learned, it's that the general populace is kind of dumb sometimes.
Yeah.
So NBC made a little bit of an error of judgment here in thinking that the general population would catch on to the fact that they were supposed to go to Peacock to watch the football game.
Right. So obviously there were people trying to watch the game who were really upset at Extended Family for interfering with the game, is how they saw it.
I think a lot of the negative backlash has to do with a bunch of angry football fans responding to not wanting to watch the show but watch the football game, not realizing they were supposed to go to Peacock to watch the football game.
Right.
So I think that has a lot to do with the
On
negative
the flip side, I also saw people tune in at 8 o'clock to watch Extended Family because all of the promotional material, even everything we covered, we said 8 o'clock because that's how it was presented originally. Right. And then if you looked at the programming guide, it actually had been delayed to 8:05. And I think people were actually I know because I was responding to some of this on Twitter and trying to redirect people and tell them, no, it's coming on, be patient. But people were turning it on at 8:00, seeing a football announcer talking, and they were like, oh, I guess it's not on, and then turning their TV off. That were looking for extended family. So it led to some confusion, and possibly some of the wrong people seeing it than who was trying to find it.
Right.
And I don't know if that got corrected when it re-aired. So I meant to re-watch and repay attention to the live chat during the second airing of the pilot, and unfortunately we had some stuff happen that day.
Yes.
We got some bad news, a death of a member of another fandom that we are involved in.
Yes, intimately associated with.
Yes, and so that was it ended up being a little bit of a rough day for us. So we didn't end up tuning back in and following extended family that night on the 26th. So I don't know if the general vibe was more positive during that airing or not than the first time around. I'd like to think so, but I'm really curious to watch along with this one tonight, the second episode, watch the chat and see if people are saying good things.
Yeah.
Or if people are still kind of unhappy with it.
Now, I don't think this is the greatest sitcom ever, at least not based on the pilot. But, it's a low stakes, amiable comedy.
Yeah, it's a sitcom.
And I can see somebody tuning into this and maybe going, shrug, meh. But I do not see anybody I don't understand the level of hatred that I saw.
We saw some pretty ridiculous comments, and we're not going to give validity to those individual people.
Yeah, I got some comments on the YouTube channel, the
on our video,
our video itself. And I'm not going to air those comments, most likely because what's the point of shouting them out when they're probably not going to be back to watch in the first place? We usually shout out
pretty much everybody who comments on our videos. But if you're going to say something unnecessarily negative, we're not going to repeat it.
Right.
We are giving voice to the fact that some people weren't happy about this show.
Yeah, absolutely. In the interest of being honest.
Right, of course. And I can give you some critical feedback about what some people are saying.
Okay, let's hear it.
As opposed to the people who are just like, I hope this show burns. Saw comments like that.
Yeah, there were definitely some humorous comments that were fun to read, for sure.
So some critiques here, okay? Some people, my husband included, not myself, thought the laugh track was a little much. And when we watched the screeners, I didn't pick up on that at all. But watching it live, I was like, oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they amplified the laugh track between when we saw it on the screener and when it aired on the TV. And I didn't do a direct comparison to see, but I'm thinking that's what it is. I think they raised the volume on the laugh track. Where it became a burden. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There are plenty of comedy shows this day and age that don't even include laugh tracks.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking the laugh track is not really totally necessary.
It's not necessary, but it certainly shouldn't overshadow the show. And I feel like perhaps it did, because I did see multiple people comment about the laugh track. And then the football game, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Not everybody loves this interview format.
Which goes away.
Right.
I mean, not
it doesn't
completely.
Go away. They continue to use it, but I will say it was dialed down quite a lot for this episode that we're talking about today, as well as for episode 3 that we've already seen. So, and I get that it was used more heavily in the first episode. That doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
They used that to help explain the situation and introduce the characters, and I'm fine with that. But I did see some people who were like, no, I don't love this. So that is what it is. And I feel like they've already self-corrected that by dialing it way back for future episodes. So I just really hope people give the show a chance and
absolutely
watch more than one episode. With any show, and we've talked about this many, many times on here, pilots are hard.
Yes, we mentioned it in the pilot
it's
video.
Hard to introduce a universe, characters, storyline, plot, the episode of the week, all in, you got 20 minutes. And for a sitcom, 21 minutes. That's hard.
Yes.
And people, the modern television audience's attention span is very small.
I mean, Adam was saying this sucks within 5 seconds of the episode.
Yeah.
Airing. So
And I'm like, what?
That tells you all you need to know about
watch
that.
it.
Right. So yeah, yeah, I didn't necessarily love the pilot. I thought it was an okay episode of television. Anything else you want to say about this?
Well, just say the pilot. When we were analyzing it, I was like, I understand all these decisions, and I feel like they were all good. You know, using the trope of the goldfish. I saw people being like, oh, that's not original. No, it's not.
It's very much not.
On purpose, it's not.
Right.
That's the point, because the overall storyline is what's original.
Right.
And I don't know. I just feel like maybe people weren't watching it the way we were watching it.
I mean, that's pretty much a guarantee.
Yeah. So they weren't like, oh, this is a good way to set up a show. They were just like, oh, this isn't entertaining me as much as I'd like to be entertained.
Right.
But I do have to say, and I said this already in our previous episode, the 3 episodes you and I have watched.
Yep.
The second episode is by far my favorite. The one we're talking about today. That's airing today, January 2nd, 2024. Having a hard time with that date. My goodness.
Yes. And Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year. I really liked this episode.
As did I.
And the third episode's great, too.
Yeah.
Out of the 3, the pilot's probably the weakest. And that's
par for
normal.
The course.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, the pilot's never going to be, like, the most amazing thing ever, right?
Right.
Because it just doesn't have room for that.
No. I can count on one hand the number of pilots that I would consider really strong episodes in any series.
Yeah, right.
So,
So the people who are listening to us right now have, I'm assuming, watched the second episode and given it a chance. So let us know. Give us comments. What do you think about this? Now that you've seen 2 episodes of this series, how are we feeling?
Yes, and I would very much appreciate some positive feedback on the show, to help us decide whether we're going to continue to look at it or not.
Yeah.
On
a positive note, though, even though we saw a lot of really critical comments, the pilot got really great ratings.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's right.
It got a 4.7 million total viewership, along with a 0.9 demo rating. And I don't know exactly what that translates to, but apparently it's really good.
Yes. I don't know what that means. I don't know what any of those numbers mean, but they're saying it's good, so I'm just going to take their word for it.
It got great ratings. And I guess the big question is how many of those people are coming back to watch episode 2?
Right. And also, that's just live numbers. Like, we said in our Quantum Leap podcast, the number of people who streamed it might be different too.
Right.
It might be a lot higher
because it's available on Peacock the following day. So you can watch this show on Tuesdays on NBC, and you can watch it Wednesday or any time after that on Peacock. Oh, and one other thing, watching the live episode of the pilot, got to see the full opening theme song from this series, which we don't get, we haven't gotten with our screeners so far. Right. And that was cool. I liked it. I like theme songs. I like when they do that. It's a little retro at this point. Yeah.
The entire show feels a little retro, which I don't mind. One interesting tidbit that I found in reading some articles on the show is the fact that a little bit of this is based on a true story. I mean, I don't know how much of it is, but apparently the actual owner of the Boston Celtics had a
who's an executive producer on the series.
Yes, and it was a name when you showed it to me. I didn't know who he was. I was just like, I don't want to pronounce that name. So I didn't specifically mention him as an executive producer. Wyke Grousback or something along those lines?
Something along those lines.
We'll
learn it for next time.
Yes. So he actually had a similar situation with a couple that was doing the similar thing that happens in the show for Destiny.
And I'm not sure, because we don't have... We were just kind of spitballing this. It's not like in our official notes. But I think those 2 people are also executive producers on the show.
Oh, are they now? Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, we didn't look into this too deeply, because we were just talking about this right before we started recording. But I had seen that 3 executive producers were influences on the story. And you had seen that one of the executive producers was the actual owner of the Celtics. So put all that together, and I'm thinking that the 3 of them are executive producers on the show.
It would make sense. All right. So do we have anything else to say before we just dive into this thing?
Yeah, let's talk about this episode. I think it's a really great one. Again, the consequences of making yourself at home. I can say after, seeing what we know, it seems like all of the episodes are going to start with the consequences of.
Right.
Being the titles of these episodes.
The third episode also had the same title.
So I think that's what they're going with. It's going to be the consequences of, and then it's going to be like, what lesson did these people learn this week as they traverse raising their family in this non-traditional way?
There should be an episode titled The Consequences of Making a Podcast.
Ooh.
All right. So anyway, the episode begins with Jim and his dad, Bobby, who we now know is Lenny Clark, who was in the John Larroquette show, which I'm bringing up because Night Court airs after Extended Family. And, of course, John Larroquette is in that show. So that's interesting.
I actually think now that we're in regular time, so that's Night Court's airing first.
Okay, Night Court is airing first?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're after Night Court. They switched it for the early premiere, but
gotcha.
Yeah, we're after Night Court now.
He was also in Halloween Kills. That's fairly recently. Mm-hmm. Did you actually see that movie?
I didn't see that one. We're a little behind on our Halloween.
Gotcha. All right, so they're sitting on the couch. They're getting ready for fishing time.
Yeah, they're going through some fishing lures and whatever.
They're apparently having some kind of father-son trip to go fishing. Julia comes in to do the handoff to take over the house, and she's about to write down notes, see what she needs to be informed of. That's something that does continue into episode 3, I noticed.
Yeah, she's looking for this really ridiculously big notebook in this really ridiculously large bag.
And Jim tells him, basically the kids have been in their rooms on their phone, where they have been for 96% of the time. I get from these 2 episodes that Jim is not really that great of a dad.
He's pretty laid back.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that's necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
They have very different parenting styles.
I mean, Jim's parenting style, I'm not sure if I want to admit this, is kind of similar.
Lot like yours.
Similar to
I was going to say that, but you preceded it with saying it's bad. So I held my tongue once you said that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay, so you refrain from directly calling me out. I'm calling myself out. My parenting style comes down to basically, whatever you do, don't get me yelled at by your mother.
And that sounds a lot like Jim.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So in comes Trey, who asks if Jim is practicing. They have this banter back and forth, and Jim is like, "Are you practicing your dad jokes?" And, speaking of dad jokes, I have plenty of them on my channel.
Yep. You can find plenty of dad jokes at Corn Productions. Go search the Shorts tab.
Trey goes away, and Bobby expresses surprise that Trey sleeps over now.
Yeah, because with Trey, he brought this giant titanium suitcase that looked like, you're moving in type of suitcase.
Or bringing in, a nuclear bomb, one or the other.
We learned this is $3,300 luggage.
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess being the owner of the Celtics, you have expensive luggage.
We're really focusing on... Not focusing on, but it's nuancing the differences between Jim and Trey, right?
Yep.
Totally different ends of the spectrum, where Jim is, stealing napkins from the Celtics box office last episode. And here Trey comes in with $3,300 luggage to spend the night.
Mm-hmm. And Bobby expresses how calm he is about the whole Trey situation. But Jim reveals his annoyance about not being asked first.
And I don't blame him.
Bobby seems amused and wonders how long of a fight that he thinks that he's going to have with Julia. But Jim says it's not going to be a fight at all. And then we have our credits. After the credits, Jim goes into the kitchen saying he knows what she thinks he doesn't know. And says she tried to sneak Trey in. Yeah,
and she, of course, very correctly says there was no sneaking involved. He walked right in with a giant suitcase.
Yes, that's a pretty good indication that he might be spending the night. We are introduced to the Constitution that they wrote, which says that they are not allowed to have romantic interest over until voted on by the family. Now, I had mentioned, excuse me a second, as I take a sip of water.
This was specifically Article 9 of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a pretty hefty document.
Yes. Now, as I said in the previous episode, this situation would require a lot of trust.
Right.
But it also makes sense that they would have a set of rules for dealing with the situation.
You talked about this stuff ahead of time and planned it out.
Right. However, going to this big dramatic big document may be a little bit of overkill.
It is a little bit overkill, but she should have talked to him first.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, everybody knows Trey. Like, the kids have obviously met him. It's not like we're like, oh, you're meeting this guy for the first time.
Right.
That, of course, is a big thing that the dad needs to know about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But if he's sleeping there, like, yeah, he should have known about it ahead of time if it's never happened before. And she's like, it's cool because we're engaged now. Okay, but yeah, like, still, if it's never happened before, there should have been a discussion about it.
Right.
Not necessarily like, I need your permission in writing, which is what he's saying. But it could have been like, hey, are you cool with this?
Right.
Like, this is happening now.
I mean, that would be common courtesy.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of with Jim here.
But also, like, the fact that this hasn't happened yet and they're already engaged. I'm not sure which end of that. Like, did they get engaged really quickly or did they go a really long time with him never sleeping over?
I mean, they indicate they slept over their house. I mean, his house plenty of times.
Right.
So.
But I'm saying, like,
yeah,
you should have done this by now.
Right.
You're already engaged. We should have already passed this threshold.
Right. Trey ends up entering and asks what the problem is. Jim denies that there is a problem, and Trey just patiently waits, knowing it's coming, and then Jim tells him exactly what the problem is. Jim ends up miming the document, and then reveals that there actually is a document, and says to follow him, and Trey is less than enthused about this. He explains, Jim ends up explaining what it is, and reads the relevant passage from Article 9, and this is the fundamental laws of the nest, it's called. And Jim didn't get or give consent, or neither was even asked for it, which was the rule that Julia insisted upon because she was worried about people that would sleep with Jim.
Yeah.
And
yeah, she didn't want him just bringing random girls home, which, you know, again, I get. This makes sense that you'd have some stipulation
boundaries
about, you know, who's sleeping here.
Right. But the joke's on her because Jim hasn't slept with anyone.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a self-own there. And Jim says, hey, it's up to the kids, and he calls them in.
Which makes perfect sense.
Right. The kids don't seem to care.
Yeah, Grace says she's okay with Trey staying, but she asks, how does Jim feel about it? Which, you know what? That was the perfect response. Like, Grace, she's pretty cool.
Right.
I like her.
And Jim also reveals that he does not care.
Yeah, he said
and then Trey's like...
He wants Trey to feel welcome to the family, just not at the expense of his kids' feelings.
Like, and Trey's like, wait, you don't care about this? Then what the heck are we even doing here?
Which is funny. But again, like, I get it.
Right.
We should have asked the kids. We should have talked about this ahead of time. But he is being ridiculously dramatic.
Right.
But it's for the sake of comedy. I mean, this isn't supposed to be realistic. It's a sitcom, people.
So since nobody has a problem here, it's unanimous. Jim finds that Trey is a...
Don't forget the fact that Jimmy says, well, I thought he's already been sleeping here.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that. By the way, we're not talking about the third episode yet, but Finn Sweeney in the third episode is pretty great.
Yeah, he gets highlighted in the next episode pretty well.
Jim finds that Trey is a permanent allowable guest, which also includes permanent bathroom rights.
I know, that's amazing. You get to use the bathroom. What
I know.
A privilege.
Right. Currently, I am not allowed to use their bathroom, but maybe Jim will grant me that permission if I ever go over there. Okay, so Jim goes on and on about fighting for democracy, and he turns around and no one is there.
Yeah, everybody's already left. And he's just talking to himself.
And yeah, I love this stuff. Trey and Julia prepare to sleep in the nest, but they are having issues sleeping there. Trey is laying in what is called Jim's fetus indent because he slept there naked plenty of times.
Yeah, the kids call it Daddy's divot.
Right.
Because he always sleeps in the exact same position, so he has this kind of indent in the mattress. And you know what? My husband has one of those.
Oh, I can imagine.
His side of the bed is very, like, this is where he lays. And nobody else can lay there because you'll just, like, roll.
Sink right in.
Yeah.
It would be like that horror movie where the bed eats you. Okay, so they end up basically agreeing to buy a new mattress, but Jim must be called in the morning because of Article 15 of this Constitution.
Yeah, and Trey wants to get this mattress, the same mattress he has at his place. It's called the Royal Lux Smart Mattress. It sounds pretty fancy.
Yes, I want one of those mattresses.
I know, right? And, you know, this is a great episode, and it's very funny, but watching this scene and, like, how we proceed to this got me thinking about this whole bird nesting, and it is kind of weird that they all, like, share the same bed.
It is a little weird.
It is a little weird.
And they actually highlight how weird it is when they talk about Jim later.
So I'm all for, like, the bird nesting and the fact that they're raising these kids in a stable environment without making the kids shuffle between. Like, I get that. It feels like a better deal for the kids than, you know, what the traditional setup is, where the kids are here and then there and then back, especially if, you know, the parents live farther apart. But ideally, I think you'd want, you know, your own bedrooms in this house.
Yeah, I would think that would be the arrangement.
Yeah.
So, all right. Jim arrives in the morning. Julia sells Jim on it. And Julia says she asked him first, so just gabble in, get it over with.
Yeah, and he at first is a little reluctant, but then he's like, you know what, you're right. You asked me, you're doing the right thing, and this is exactly what I was talking about yesterday. I'm happy you consulted with me, and sure, we could use a new mattress.
But then Trey comes in with the new mattress, which causes Jim to rescind the ruling, saying that Trey... Oh, okay, so yeah. It's, you know, because of the fact that Trey already ordered
ordered the mattress. And Julia's like, I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know he ordered it already. Yeah, here's the furniture guys, like, moving it in. Like, they couldn't have waited 5 more minutes. Everything would have been cool.
And Trey ends up saying to Jim, hey, look, I know I jumped the gun, but there was like a 6-month waiting period.
6 months wait list. And he said the only reason they got this one is because Taylor Swift's cats didn't like it.
Oh.
So it's been returned. It was bought originally for Taylor Swift's cats.
Okay.
They're saying something about Taylor Swift there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's a crazy cat lady. So he insists, hey, try out the mattress. And he gets pushed into it, and he agrees. It's amazing. So, yep, they get to keep the mattress.
Yeah, he, like, totally fell in love with his mattress. And it did look pretty comfortable.
It did. I want one. You sold me on it. Okay, so next thing we know, they're doing something with
putting together the bed, and they removed the headboard. And I couldn't tell exactly why they were removing the headboard, because in the last scene, like, the bed was there and everything looked set up and fine. Right.
I didn't quite understand that, but Trey discovers footprints, which eventually is revealed to be caused by extracurricular naughty activities.
Oh, there you go. That's a good way to put it.
Yes, so I don't get demonetized for you know, saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, and Jim and Julia had this whole, like, they were laughing, you know, it was a very inside joke story of exactly how this happened. And they, you know, they told the story about, like, they were at some wine festival, and it was grapes on her feet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because she had been stomping grapes, you know, like in the classic I Love Lucy episode. So her feet were stained with grapes. And Trey was, like, really confused, like, okay, but how did the footprints end up on the wall?
Right.
And Jim had to go demonstrate the position of exactly how this happened, which was pretty humorous.
Yep, and this does not exactly thrill Trey. Later, alone, she confesses that at one point, Jim and Julia, in fact, hooked up.
Yeah.
As if the children were not proof of that.
Yeah, she confessed to him. She did, in fact, sleep with her ex-husband while they were married.
Imagine that. He claims not to be bothered, but and Trey ends up suggesting a solution: paint. Julia goes back to the Constitution, which is starting to annoy Trey.
Yeah. She's like, great, let's just ask Jim.
Right, yeah, if we can paint over, you know.
I mean, again, I get it. Like, you both live here. This isn't her place. This is the kid's house. They both own this place. You shouldn't be making big changes without both parties knowing.
Right. But Trey decides to go rogue and not inform either of them.
Yeah, so this is where we get our first, like, little interview style shot of the episode. And it's Trey telling us that he sent Julia and the kids to his place in Nantucket so that he can have painters over, and she wouldn't even know about it. Like, neither of them would know. He's just going to have it done.
Right.
Which, that was overstepping, Trey.
Yes.
This is not your place. You were given permission to sleep here, not, you know, redecorate.
Right. So he starts to do that, but Jim comes in and argues with Trey about what he did because it's already happened. And I thought he was going to have a bigger problem with the footprints being painted over.
Yeah, he doesn't care about painting. He's like, great, new paint, I'm not paying for it, awesome.
But he does care that he wasn't consulted, basically.
Exactly.
And he starts laughing because he thinks Julia is going to kill him because the paint chart was also painted over.
The height chart.
Height chart. That's what I said paint chart.
Yeah. So on the edge of the closet wall, which Jim went into the closet, because the reason he's here is he brought his fishing pole back. I don't know why he couldn't have waited until they did the switch to bring his fishing pole back. But he comes in to bring, you know, he's overstepping. It's not your week. You just walk into the house and walk into the bedroom.
Right.
You're overstepping now.
Yeah. So they're both guilty of it.
They are. And so he sees that, you know, the whole room was painted, but also the door on the closet was painted right over this height chart. Now, I'd say these painters you hired, they should have caught that and said, like, oh, wait, are we painting this? Because that's something significant. If you see that, you're not just going to be like, I'm going to paint over it because I was told to paint.
Yeah, you would figure that they would have some common sense.
The painters would have been like, are we leaving this?
Right, yeah.
Like, but no, apparently that didn't happen. Nobody knew about this. And Jim, you know, he's not upset about this. He's happy about this because he's right. Mm-hmm. He gets to say to Trey, haha, you messed up and Julia's going to hate you for it.
They argue some more, but before Bobby comes in and compares them to basset hounds who peed over everything, and then they ended up, like, taking turns basically peeing over the same things that the other
they were having a dog peeing contest.
Right.
We also got a reference during this little argument to the January 6th reference.
Right.
I know there's going to be a certain crowd who already is not happy with this show, complaining about that comment being in there.
Yes. They ended up apologizing to each other, and Bobby agrees to fix the height chart issue.
Yeah, he says he just needs some turpentine, and there's a 50-50 chance it would work.
Right.
And then we get a little interview moment from Grandpa Bobby, saying there wasn't a chance it wouldn't work. I feel like there was a lot of chances that wouldn't have worked. But,
right.
I mean, it did. So good job, Grandpa Bobby. One note I had to make, when he was giving the Basset Hound story, he referred to our Basset Hounds, and he kept saying we. So I'm wondering if there's a grandma in the picture we haven't met yet. I was kind of going under the impression that, like, grandma was gone.
Yeah.
Because we haven't talked about her yet. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the way he was telling this story, it sounded like he was talking about a spouse.
Yeah.
So I think there's a grandma in the picture, and I can't wait to see who they cast to play the Jim's mom.
Right.
That would be awesome, I think, to see that character pop up.
I'm sure. Julia and the kids come home just after Bobby finishes. And basically Trey and Jim admit that they talked and they decide to paint.
Because she smells the paint. She's like, I smell paint.
And, Trey is impressed by their sense of smell. And meanwhile, Julia is impressed that the two of them got together and actually made it a bipartisan decision.
Yeah, I mean, together. She should kind of be upset they didn't ask her.
Right.
But she's like, I don't care. You guys
are getting along, so whatever.
Yeah.
The kids end up getting measured, then Julia, then Jim, and then Jim touchingly has Trey measured. Now, this is a sign that, Jim is accepting Trey.
Yeah. And
officially accepting Trey.
Yeah, and I think Trey was really touched by this, that he was asked to add his name to the height chart. From which they're all measured, and then Jim proclaims that he's taller than Trey. Which I don't think he is.
No.
I looked at that scene a couple times, and I'm like, you're not.
No.
Like, you're not taller.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Where that came from.
Right.
And it was also funny because they were like, oh, Julia's up 3 inches, but that's because she's had her heels on.
Right. Yeah, it's uncommon for a woman of advanced years to have a growth spurt.
It's uncommon for any grown adult to be changing heights. Like, usually these are just for the kids. I'm not sure why the parents are getting their height taken at all, but whatever.
Yeah. And then we have our epilogue, which I'm sure is where the credits are going to roll.
Yeah, this is the end credit scene.
Trey and Julia are hanging on their couch.
I'm assuming that's Trey's place.
Yeah. Trey gets a notification that Jim is getting naked because it's a smart bed, and it would tell him that information.
Yeah, I think the mattress is a little too smart.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I want the bed to know that information. Thank you very much. And then Trey decides to mess with the temperature control so that the
bed gets really cold.
And Jim will freeze to death.
Yeah.
And that is where the episode ends.
So we see Jim curled up in the bed shivering.
Yep. And that's where the episode ends. Fun episode. It was just a fun episode. It was pretty good.
Yeah. And
definitely an improvement over the pilot.
During that scene, right before they did their height, it was Grandpa Bobby that was trying to tell. So the kid, what's his name? Jimmy.
Yep.
He's like, he wants to jump on the bed, and Bobby, the grandpa, is the one who's like, why don't you get your height measured first?
Oh.
I think Bobby was proud of the fact that he fixed the height chart and wanted to draw attention to it.
Yeah.
And in this moment, both Jim and Trey were working together to try and pull Julia's attention away.
Right.
They didn't want her looking at the height chart because they were, at this point, both worried that she was going to notice it's been tampered with.
Right.
And she didn't. Because Bobby, again, did a great job. And he pulled it off. But the fact that Jim and Trey both were like, no, just jump on the bed.
Right.
I thought that was really funny, that you can see them coming together to avoid Julia's scorn.
So, this was not originally supposed to be the second episode.
Well, when we got the screener for the pilot, there were also photos that were listing an episode called The Consequences of Sushi, I believe, as episode 2. And even as much as, I think 2 days ago, IMDb had that listed as the title for the second episode.
Interesting.
And I checked right before we started recording. They fixed that.
Okay.
So they have it correctly listed, and the listings show that this is what's actually airing. I was a little worried about that. But the listings do say The Consequences of Making Yourself at Home is episode 2.
Because this actually makes sense as a second episode.
Yeah. And they even referenced the goldfish at one point.
Yeah, they did. I remember that.
I think it was when they were arguing about painting, and Jim was like, "You're, to Trey, like you're getting mad at, or you were mad at me for you were, what am I trying to say? You were trying to like keep me from lying about the goldfish, right? Because you're so honest and you didn't want me to know about the goldfish, but you're lying about like painting our apartment." So they brought up the goldfish. I mean, obviously anything's happening after the goldfish. That was clearly the pilot.
Right.
But yeah, there was another episode that has been moved or possibly even removed altogether. I don't know. Because all we know so far is the titles of the first 3 episodes. We haven't received anything beyond that. So I'm not sure. Those pictures are still on there on the press site, but they don't have an episode number anymore.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I don't know. There may be an episode at some point called The Consequences of Sushi.
Will it go back in time where Trey has not yet been invited to sleep over?
It's possible. Yeah. Or, it just doesn't come up in that episode.
I mean, I don't think that would be an issue every episode, for
right.
sure.
Not every episode is going to focus on, like, sleeping.
Yes.
Especially
that would be a pretty boring series.
Because we've got, they're quick segments and we're jumping around. We're moving pretty quick. It's a sitcom. We got, again, 20 minutes to tell the whole story.
Right.
But I thought this was a great one. It was, the first time I watched this, I laughed a lot. Obviously, I laughed less, like on second and third viewing, taking notes.
That tends to happen.
But I thought it was a pretty solid episode.
Yeah.
And I really hope that the people who do give the show a chance and have watched both episodes come to say, okay, this is fun. And, they give them a chance.
I mean, there's worse ways to spend a half hour, for sure.
There absolutely are worse ways to spend a half hour. And, if you want to just relax and watch a sitcom, I think Extended Family is a great choice.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Great choice. And you know what? There's not a lot of great new ideas out there. And this is a fairly fresh idea, I think. It's not, nothing against revivals. We cover Quantum Leap. We're excited about that. Nothing against Night Court. I'm not a Night Court fan. But it's great, I think, that if there's an audience for that, and there's people that want to watch it, which obviously there are.
There's also a Frasier revival as well.
Is there?
That just came out, yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear about that one.
Yeah.
So nothing against revivals. I love classic television, and if it's a show that I like, I'm happy to see it continue in some fashion. So I'm not complaining about revivals, but there's just been a lot of that lately, right? Revivals and prequels and sequels and reimaginings, and it's not that often we get something fresh. And this is something fresh, and it's refreshing.
So, yeah, I would recommend, personally, giving the show a chance and giving it a couple more episodes.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I'm real curious to see where they go with it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the best thing ever.
No.
But then again, I can't think of a sitcom that is the best thing ever. It's a sitcom. It's meant to be something light and hearty. You can turn it on when you're, have a little downtime.
I don't understand calling this series the worst sitcom ever.
Right.
Because there's been plenty of bad sitcoms.
Right. But
So I think it's a little bit of hyperbole.
A sitcom is casual viewing. You can watch it while scrolling on your phone.
Right.
You can watch it while cooking dinner or while eating dinner or just while you're waiting for that 9 o'clock show you want to watch to come on. I'm not actually sure what comes on NBC at 9 o'clock on Tuesdays. I probably should have thought that through before I said that. But, yeah, that's what it is. It's a sitcom.
Yep.
You can, once, they exist more than 2 episodes, you can binge watch them in a marathon. Or, you can watch them out of order. It's fine.
Right.
It's casual, fun viewing for a few laughs. And I think that, this cast is doing a great job.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think they're doing a really great job. And I do think there is chemistry between them.
Yep. All right. So we have any more thoughts about this episode?
Nope. I just hope people give it a chance, and we will definitely be back to talk about the 3rd episode at least. We haven't seen any past that, but we do want to hear from you guys. What do you think of the show? Is anybody even listening to us talk right now?
I mean, it's fine if we're just talking to each other. That's cool. But
if you've gotten this far in the podcast, comment down below footprints.
Footprints. All right, that's a good password.
Give us footprints, and then we'll know that you're actually listening to us.
All right, sounds good. Stacie, we reached out.
I can reach on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Corn Productions. You can join one of my Corn Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something from the Corn Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as ourselves. And you can actually join a Corn Productions membership for 99 cents a month. And you can also like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to our channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Corn Productions, signing off.